I am very excited to get into our conversation today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Massella Dukuly, Head of Workplace Strategy at Charter. And today we're just going to dive into how to build an audience and influence as a C-suite leader. We're talking about something that I think is inevitable but also really wild, which is the influencer era of executives. And today we have two leaders who I'm sure many of you seeing their faces are very familiar with and perhaps have been influenced by in some way or another. We have Hebba Youssef and Annie Dean. Yes, give them a round of applause, please. Annie Dean is the Chief Strategy Officer at CBRE, which is a new role for her. She's 5 weeks in, but she is there and helping one of the world's largest real estate firms reimagine how people work and specifically where that work happens. Prior to CBRE, she was leading remote work strategy at Meta, and she actually founded the Teamwork Lab at Atlassian, which is a data science group studying how AI is transforming collaboration. And then we have Hebba Youssef, who is the Chief People Officer at Workweek, and she is also the voice behind the hit newsletter, I Hate It Here. Not here. I don't think she hates it here.
Don't hate it here.
But she's built one of the most powerful, influential, authentic voices and brands in the people space. So, all while leading culture and strategy at a very fast-growing media company. So we're going to get into what that means and looks like for you, especially in today's world. So I want to kind of set the stage a little bit. Both of you have built very powerful public voices, and you've done so as executives. And now for some people, again, you are really a big brand. Your faces alone, just even when you think about who we're listening to or reading on LinkedIn. And I'm curious about when you realized that your digital presence was actually going to be a form of leadership.
You want to jump in?
Yeah.
Go.
I think I really realized it when I was sharing a story on LinkedIn about I was at Transform, the HR conference, and I got in a cab, and the cab driver said a lot of things to make me feel like very unsafe. And I was like, oh, I didn't know what to do. So I was like, I'll just like sit this through. Like he said a lot of like really disparaging things about a group that I am a part of. So I was like, oh, this is not great. So I went over to LinkedIn and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to share this story about like what to do as a woman. It was like very scary to be in a cab. I was like, if I say anything, is this guy going to pull over and be like, get out of my cab? And I just had to sit there and listen to like really hateful speech. And so I like made a post about it on LinkedIn just to remind people like to be careful, what they're saying to other people, to be mindful that people have different experiences. And after I made that post, I had like 3 employees reach out, and they're like, hey, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Something similar has happened to me, and I just don't want that to happen to anyone who works here. And I think at the time I was like, whoa, I know I'm a CPO at a company, but I didn't really think that my employees connected that deeply with just like me as a person, an experience that I was having outside of their head of HR. And I think that was kind of the moment for my employees where I was like, oh, wow, this really means something to them that I'm continuing to share about these issues that are impacting me and other groups around the world.
Yeah, I love just like that highlight of connection. Like people are desperately looking for a connection. Annie?
I love this question, and it's funny, hearing your response kind of changes the way that I think about how I would respond. I think initially I would have talked about, well, when I was in my most recent role, in my most recent couple of roles, there was big change around how work was happening, and there was a big disconnect between how the press and CEOs were making headlines about how work was happening and how I was seeing companies get built and what success looked like in models that embraced things like distributed and flexible work. And so, I think I saw that there was a gap where I could add clarity, and that was something that ended up being really meaningful to the wider conversation, and that was great. But hearing your story is a reminder that actually I think I got started in this concept of the future of work more than 10 years ago. My older son is now 12. And back then, actually, when I was still a corporate attorney practicing real estate law, I started a blog, actually. And it was about my experience as a woman. And funnily enough, that community that I established, which was really about work and being a woman, that led to the startup that was about the future of work and my subsequent future of work roles, that audience still exists. Yeah. And it's funny, every once in a while, I get stopped on the street. My first hire at Atlassian, who was somebody I'd wanted to work with forever, was actually somebody that I met through creating that blog. So, it's a reminder that when you are authentically sharing what matters to you, and it's kind of a moment where that message is not being widely shared, you can create this really authentic connection with people that, turns into people that support you for 10 or 15 years later, or end up being your first hire. So, yeah.
It's really powerful. I think hearing you both, it reminds us, right, and we'll get to it, but authenticity really matters in this. I find that when people are very successful in how their public personas show up on social, whatever version of social it is, it really comes from something that was authentic and true to them. But it also makes me think about the evolution. So how that personal experience translates to how other people, whether at your company or externally, actually receive you. And ironically enough, right, LinkedIn is now becoming like the press release system. And I'm curious about what that actually means for how companies should be approaching communication, especially for leaders who are now responsible for breaking their own news.
Well, it's really interesting to think about this because, one of the things I experienced when I was an executive in my last company was that the way that we were trying to test and learn about the messaging and of our own product set was such an incredible playground to use LinkedIn as a way to do that, because we immediately saw what people would be able to repeat because it was simple and clear enough, where people had pushback on messaging. And ultimately that became so successful that we really adopted as a company a strategy of using our executives to announce and support product releases and to build authentic community with our users. And so it was really interesting to see how things that we trialed because we could tell that there was value kind of eventually became corporate strategy in our marketing department.
I kind of have the actual opposite experience. So my company is a creator-led media company. We own like 6 media properties. One of them is the one that I developed with them called I Hate It Here. And we've kind of told all of our employees, I might write about things that we might never do at the company. And that the employees have to realize that when I am on LinkedIn, yes, I am their CPO, but I also am a thought leader in the space, and there might be topics and conversations that my CEO and I are talking about behind closed doors that he might say no about that I might go and actually support on LinkedIn. So it's been really interesting. It's a very dynamic experience, honestly. We tell all of our employees day one, like who I am and what my role is, because I do still do the chief people officer work. I'm still doing performance conversations, launching things, recruiting. But we had to make it clear to them that I'm going to have an opinion on things that we might never make real strategy at this company. And they have to know that when I'm talking about it, I'm coming at it from like the thought leadership perspective.
I want to get into that because it sounds like there are different flavors of what this might look like at different organizations. And in both scenarios, or I'm sure there's probably another hybrid version of this, leaders are being told just relentlessly at this point, like, be authentic. But it's really, really difficult in an era where distrust is growing rapidly. Kevin brought this up early, and I'll get into some stats, but this latest Edelman Trust Barometer stated that trust is down 3 points globally, I think down to 75% from where it's been. And it's not just the 3 points, it's that this is very rare. It hasn't happened in years. And also 68% of people believe business leaders deliberately mislead them, which I think is wild. That said, authenticity can't be something that's strategyless. So how do you decide what parts of your thinking or experience are for the feed versus for your internal team or the boardroom?
If it impacts me personally, like is something that I am experiencing as a woman, as a Muslim woman, as an Arab woman in America, I'm probably going to post something about it. And my CEO and I have this understanding that if I'm talking about it from a personal lens, that he does not actually have the right to tell me not to post anything. And I'm in a very unique position where like my company makes money off of a brand I have built. And the more I am myself, the better we have seen the brand perform. So we have this agreement that like I will talk about the things that personally impact me. I will talk about the things that I'm deeply passionate about, either in the newsletter, through sharing articles, on the podcast. But if it's like confidential company information, that does not make it to LinkedIn. until we talk about if this is something that's like LinkedIn appropriate. Like we had to do a layoff. I didn't run to LinkedIn the day after we did a layoff to be like, I ran a layoff, here's how it went.
Yeah.
We were not gonna do that. And that was like a real conversation we had, because I was like, first of all, we had like 13 people impacted, like I'm not gonna go do that to our former employees. So we take it day by day. If like a conversation happens internally that's confidential, I'm obviously not gonna post about it. If there's leeway, I will run it by him. But like in the 3 years he and I have worked together, I think I've run 2 things by him, and both times he was like, why are you even asking me? Like, I trust you implicitly. Go do the right thing. Go post if you want to post.
Annie, I'm curious.
Yeah, and for me, I think it's interesting because authenticity to me comes in a couple of different forms, or gets challenged in a couple of different forms, specifically in my area, which is that I think people see that the thought leadership that my different teams have developed has been valuable. And so that's a tool for companies. And so they're like, okay, create the thought leadership. And my favorite joke about thought leadership is that in order to be a thought leader, you need to have actual thoughts.
True.
And it takes time and effort to develop thoughts. So, I think a lot of people ask me, how do you build a platform and how do you create an authentic conversation? And for instance, right now on LinkedIn, I'm not as active. And that's because I'm really looking at the landscape on AI. I think there's a lot to learn. I'm thinking about what are the few themes that really are interesting to me in this next phase. And for instance, I'm just about to announce that I'll be teaching a course at Columbia on transforming organizations through AI. That is a mechanism to develop research that helps me have thoughts.
Yeah.
And similarly, in my role now at CBRE, I'm also establishing a lab, the Building Experience Lab, to develop the next set of ideas that are really worth sharing. So for me, authenticity is that I only want to share ideas with all of you and with the general public if I really believe in them and if I feel like they're valid and have value. And it would be inauthentic for me to just be commenting. And one of the things that I've always told my team is that we don't add commentary, we add clarity. And it takes time and effort to build clarity.
It sounds like, and again, it's really interesting to me because I think people want a formula. I think even coming into this conversation, I was like, great, what are the 5 things that I want to take away? How can I make it easy for people? But each of you have a different set of values that are driving how you think about authenticity, how you think about your brand, how you think about the brands that you represent. Another question that I want to tap into, Annie, specifically with you, and you two have, but getting into what you just mentioned, the algorithm rewards hot takes and controversy. We are like in the provocateur, say the worst, craziest thing, and people lose their minds. Either they hate you or they love you, but like you did something. And it's wild. How do you navigate that tension? Because especially as leaders who need to cultivate respect and influence both externally and internally, I can imagine that's tricky.
I think we did find that. I think my audience on this topic definitely grew at a time where what we were studying was part of the zeitgeist, and there was a lot of controversy around it. So I definitely want to acknowledge that. I do think that people and the algorithm rewarded us for being clear and for being calm and offering a sense of a deeper explanation for what was happening as opposed to adding fuel to the fire. So we never wanted to call people out. We always wanted to see the full picture and add where we thought real value, where there was a valuable counterpoint that people should understand, or where data was being misrepresented, or where a headline was mischaracterizing a deeper issue. But I also think that there are formulaic things that you can do, like see that the first sentence of a LinkedIn post should be really punchy, and that you want to make a point that resonates and is well written and is not long. And those things have become the fun challenge. And there was a process that we had where we would just get into a session for 30 minutes, I think twice a week. And we would kind of put the timer clock on, and we knew we had a concept. We were always kind of collecting concepts throughout the week, but we would give ourselves 30 minutes to write one post. And we would be like, buzzer beater, we got it. It was such a fun thing to do. And then you would see, and you could tell if you post something and it starts to get a lot of reactions within an hour, you nailed it. And if it doesn't, you're like, this post is going to languish. So it's, maybe it's not about being in the controversy, but it is being aware that life is about a little bit of drama, and you want to make sure that you can tell a story well.
Yeah, I mean, and when I think about, I hate it here. Like you came out from the gate saying like, no, this shouldn't look like this. So like, where does that sort of sit in how you think about that tension?
Yeah, I think I have to explain like the context in which I Hate It Here came to be, which was like almost 3 years ago. I was interviewing at Workweek, and I was talking to the CEO and the co-founder, and they were like, "Hey, have you ever thought about creating content?" And I was like, "Me? Who like cares what I say?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Well, we think a lot of people would care what you say." And I was like, "Well, I go on LinkedIn, and like everyone is like so polished, they're so put together, they're like stringing out thoughts. Like I have a lot of half thoughts, I have a lot of sarcasm, I have a lot of pop culture references. I'm making like that is the core of me." I was like, "I don't think I fit in there." And they were like, "Well, why don't you just try?" And so like my LinkedIn strategy is like, do I have hot takes? Yeah, who doesn't? But like, am I chasing engagement or likes? Not so much. I'm basically just trying to show up on that platform every day as myself and to encourage others to do the same. Because for so long, LinkedIn felt like such an echo chamber. I was like, I am tired of the same 5 people having the same 5 opinions, and not one of them is from an underrepresented group. Like, I don't want to be reading that on LinkedIn day in and day out. I want to be reading fresh, new, interesting takes that push me forward. And if people want to come and argue with me in my comments, I'm going to engage. Because like maybe you'll challenge my thinking. Maybe I will walk away from the post and be like, you know what? I was really wrong about that one thing I said we should do. I'm going to do it differently now, and here's what I learned. So
yeah,
my take on it is like a little different. I like being controversial. I like having an opinion, and I think more people should fight each other on LinkedIn. Just kidding.
I imagine that is also part of the audience building, and I want to mention, like for myself included, just even in the work that we do here at Charter, like building an audience is tiring. Like it is a lot of energy. It's like the post, the whole thing, and I'm also thinking about the fact that both of you have big, real roles that you are also trying to fulfill and navigate. What's your playbook for balancing the two things? There is your personality publicly, and there's the work that you have to do every day. Like you said, the performance reviews, and you have to talk about real estate and understand what that means for the company and understand what AI means. Like, how do you balance that?
For me, using LinkedIn and building an audience is a tool for driving the business objective that I'm trying to get to. So I've always been in transformational roles. I've found that by using LinkedIn and an external audience, it's a great way to drive visibility and awareness internally to what you're building and the ideas that you're establishing. It helps people understand what you're working on and how they can come to you. And it helps you refine your thinking, by being forced to communicate what you're trying to build and the ideas that support it. You're always refining what you're actually working on. And so that's how I've thought about it.
I think if I show up, I do really love the word authentic because I do feel like I am authentically myself. I've like really grown and settled into who I am. And part of that is also like when I'm on LinkedIn, is this something I would be proud of? Is this something if an employee of the company I worked at would read it and think she's lying or she's telling the truth? And so when I show up on LinkedIn, I'm really thinking about that, and other platforms too, is like, if this is something the employee would read, would they bring it back to me and be like, but this isn't how you show up? Because I would be embarrassed by that. So that drives kind of a lot of it, and balancing it is really hard. I have probably like upset a lot of employees by things I have said. I've made a lot of them feel seen. I have taken stances on things that I think they felt comforted by that maybe we didn't do as a company, and we just have that conversation dynamically all the time. Yeah. But I'm like not balancing it well. Yeah. Like I'm in a flow state every day between a performance conversation to a newsletter write to an ad write to a podcast episode, and I'm constantly context shifting all day long and probably wasting like 4 hours of my day just trying to do it all. Yeah. So not balancing it well.
I think it's a lot, and I think like the both of you have stated already, I think it comes down to, again, some of those guiding principles and like recalibrating often. Yeah. 2 more questions, both kind of rapid speed rounds, but how do you make sure that your digital presence creates organizational value? Because I think impact really matters here.
That's a great question. I think it's very intentionally designed to do that. So I think when you're a transformation leader, you have to really situate yourself in the societal context, the data, the business value that your company creates, the way that you communicate. You're it's like a prism where you're trying to find the straight shot to meet all of those objectives. And I think when I communicate, I'm always trying to do that. Yeah. I also see it as one of the dangers of being somebody with thoughts is that people think of you as only a thought leader. And so I always am working to make sure that when I'm acting as a thought leader, I'm either driving business value or I'm doing it because I believe it's a public service. And I believe that there's something that needs to be said that is currently unsaid. Yeah. And so, between those two things, I feel like no matter what I'm doing, I'm creating value.
That's hard. I'm also on TikTok, which is just like a wild variation of me being me. And all of my employees see that and send the TikToks to each other. So that's really fun for me. But as I'm thinking about like creating value, I anchor back to that, like, am I showing up as myself? Is this a direct reflection of who I am at work, in my personal life, and who I aspire to be? And if the answer is yes, then I do think I'm adding value at my organization, because people do not trust HR. It's just like a common thing. I made a TikTok about it, went viral. People were like, HR is the worst human beings on earth. And I'm like, some HR teams, not all of them. Yeah. So I think if I can continue to show up across all my platforms and show my employees, like, I am who I say I am, I do what I say I'm gonna do. When I don't do it, do I follow up and take accountability? Yes. Then I think that creates a bunch of trust in the organization, trust in the message my CEO is sending, trust in the message my leadership is sending, trust in the message I am trying to send every single day.
Amazing.
At a time when trust is decreasing.
There we go.
Brought it back.
Very quick speed round. Who's a voice on LinkedIn who is a must follow for you right now?
Madison Butler.
Okay.
I think she hasn't been posting as much recently, but she is amazing.
Nick Turley, the head of product at ChatGPT. I really like seeing what they're putting out. I also think Ethan Mollick is releasing a lot of great research on AI.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.